my name's Charlotte. I'm one of the project directors here with the Pharma group. And Claus, I will not take away from you telling everybody a bit more about yourself.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you for the invitation, Charlotte, and Patricia, thanks for the perfect pronunciation of my last name, which is quite rare. I have to say, Zieler is not, I don't hear that very often. Yeah. I'm Claus Zieler. I'm Chief Commercial Officer at Astellas. Astellas, you may know, a Japanese pharmaceutical company, very global, unlike many other Japanese pharmas, and present in prostate cancer and in transplantation, in urology, and in cancer. That's what we do for our bread and butter, yeah, trying to serve patients as best we can.
Great. Thanks, Claus, for the intro. Right, so our discussion today is all around driving patient value through innovation and partnership, and I know those are words we've been hearing a lot of as the conference has taken place alongside AI. I think that's another big word that we're probably a bit exhausted by hearing, and so I'm quite keen for us to spend some time really digging into the definitions of what those can mean. But I suppose we'll start with looking at perhaps when we think about the whole ecosystem, the whole healthcare ecosystem, what do you feel is Pharma's unique stardust in that? What do we really bring in terms of innovation?
I think we're not recognized enough for the innovation we bring. I mean, from my perspective, Pharma is probably one of the innovation engines in the world right now. Yeah? I mean, together probably with the tech industry. The amount of innovation that we bring to the world, to society, is absolutely amazing. And I'll just want to give you sort of 2 or 3 sort of snapshots of that. And take something like hepatitis C. 30 years ago, or 25 years ago, if you were diagnosed with hepatitis C, you had about 40% chance of cure. That means 60% chance of liver injury and liver transplantation. Yeah? Yeah. Nowadays, we get to 98% cure. 98% cure within 25 years. Take cervical cancer. Cervical cancer, 12,000 women die every year in Europe of cervical cancer. Yeah. Cervical cancer, we now have a vaccine. 98% of cervical cancers can be prevented now. That did not exist 25 years ago. And if you just take other cancers, and you look at 5-year survival rates, take melanoma, we essentially doubled the survival rate in melanoma in the last 20 years. That innovation is something very, very few other industries are able to talk about. And we should be, I think, more proud of that. We should talk more about that. We should talk to policymakers about that. Because I don't think we are recognized for the value that we bring to patients through the innovation power of our industry.
Thanks, Claus. So we want to obviously address how we can partner effectively with different stakeholders in order to ensure that we are driving that innovation that we're so proud of to patients where it can really make a difference. I want to sort of break that down into some of the key decision makers who are responsible for that access. So why don't we start with a bit of hearing your perspective on how we can partner better with governments, research bodies, before we sort of talk about the patients and the practice.
I mean, let's take the positive example first, right? If you take COVID and you look at what this industry, together with governments, and the funding that came through the governments, and the expedited approvals that came from agencies, from regulatory agencies. Yeah? So in a concerted effort between the private innovation and the government attention and will to make this work, we managed to develop, approve, manufacture, distribute, and inject 13 billion doses of vaccines within 12 months. 13 billion doses of vaccines within 12 months. What other example do you have where a problem statement was recognized, addressed, and executed on within 12 months? This is absolutely spectacular. Absolutely spectacular. It was in part possible because the innovation power of the industry was ready to address it, but in part also because the willingness of government agencies on the regulatory side and then the funding side to make this possible. The industry alone would not have been able to do it. The government alone would not have been able to do it. The concerted effort made it possible. Yeah? So I think an absolutely stellar example of how coming together between government and private actually drives value for patients, in this case, preventing COVID infections. Yeah? So I think that's one of the best examples. Now, if we go back into normal settings, yeah, I think we struggle significantly in many parts of the world with the delays that we suffer from on the agency side, and yes, also the lack of funding that we suffer from on the government side. You may be aware that our industry association, FPIA, has constructed what's called a weight index, yeah, WAIT, which essentially only measures from the time that the European Medicine Agency approves a drug, how long does it take until it's reimbursed in different European countries? And you know we have national systems, so it's different country by country. So you have quite extreme examples. You have Germany, where reimbursement takes 128 days, and you can access it from day one. And you have Eastern European countries where it takes 900 days. On average, it takes 500 days, 517 to be correct, between approval and reimbursement. That's a huge delay in access, huge. And it's essentially because coffers are empty and no one knows how to pay for this. That's what's behind it. Yeah? So how do we solve that? I think that is where we need to come together as industry and as government and say, we got to be able to deliver a better access to innovative medicines to patients. I mean, governments want that, patients want that, industry wants that. It has to be possible to find better solutions than we have today. But right now, we're faced with a significant issue from a patient's perspective in accessing innovation in Europe, but also in other parts of the world. Yeah.
So we pulled out funding quite a bit, and I know that there's an ambition to sustainably fund innovation. Sustainably, what does that mean to you? What does that look like?
I mean, it's a good question. I think it has different components to it. Yeah. But one of the main components that I see is as you look forward into paying for innovation, we have different technologies coming online, right? If you think of cell therapies that are being developed, if you think of gene therapies which are being developed, we're shifting in the future from the chronic disease medication that we are accustomed to seeking reimbursement for, like the pack of the monthly pack of hypertension medicine or the monthly pack of statins. So that's a cash stream that comes on a monthly basis. All of a sudden, you have a one-time infusion of a gene with a potential cure. Now, how do governments who pay for that, how are they going to deal with that? Yeah, when all of a sudden your whole value proposition gets compressed into a one-time infusion, and it either works and then you have to pay, or it doesn't work and then you maybe don't have to pay. But these are completely different modalities than what we're used to today. Yeah? So I think when you look at sustainable, one component is, yes, we have demographically, we have an aging population, and that increases healthcare costs, and how do governments then pay for that? Yeah? That's sort of the comprehensive cost issue. Yep. But then we also have these innovations driving completely different reimbursement modalities, which we have to think about. Yeah? I would argue that the governments probably have squeezed efficiencies and cost reductions out of the pharma sector to an extent that there's very little left to grab as savings if you don't want to break the innovation machine. And I would argue that the focus now needs to go into how do we look at the healthcare system as a whole. Remember, 85% of healthcare costs are non-medicine related costs. 15% are medicine related costs. 85% are hospitals, doctors, nurses, the whole infrastructure. And if you look at that infrastructure, and you look at, for instance, the digitalization of that infrastructure, that is quite far behind some other industry sectors. Yeah? So why shouldn't we push for a higher degree of digitalization, a higher degree of standardization in electronic medical records? When I was living in Singapore, the government made a very concerted effort to say, we want the same software in every hospital in the country so that we can exchange information, mine the data, et cetera, et cetera. How many countries does that happen in? Not so many. Yeah? How many clinics do you go to and the doctor has a different software than the next doctor you go to? Yeah? How inefficient is this system? And you could imagine by standardizing that you could reduce costs by doing that. Yeah? Apart from accessing data for research purposes, which is also interesting, you could actually reduce costs by increasing the degree of digitalization and the degree of standardization within digital software solutions in the entire healthcare value chain. Yeah? And those cost savings are then available for paying for innovation, and that's what patients want. And we're back to how do we get innovation to patients?
Great. I'm definitely keen to pick up, what the role of technology can be in creating those efficiencies. It's great to hear that example coming to life in Singapore, and I think it's on everyone's agenda to try and move towards standardizing that. But just to zoom in very briefly on the patient and the HCP in this, since they are who we're ultimately looking to serve, how can we partner in a way that's meaningful to them and actually drives change, improves access, improves the system of care?
Yeah. So let me start with the HCPs.
Okay.
I mean, HCPs are human beings and are consumers like every one of us, right? When I was a rep, and you can probably see this was 30 years ago, yeah? When I was a rep, everything was paper-based. I was still signing off every visit on a piece of paper and handed it in to headquarters for documentation of the visit. Yeah? We didn't have, tablets, and we didn't have webinars, and we didn't have emails, and we didn't have chatbots or Gen AI. I mean, all of that in the 90s was, even the words did not exist. Yeah? So the only way a doctor had access to information was a face-to-face visit from an MSL or a rep, or going to a congress, or reading a paper. That was the world. Yeah? If you look at the world now, the access to information has exploded, absolutely exploded. There are so many channels that you can access information through being a doctor or being a patient. We know that from US surveys, we know that almost 90% of patients read up, Google their disease or symptoms before they go see a doctor. Almost 90%. Yeah? Where would that have happened in the 90s? No patient would have read up on anything before going to the doctor. Yeah? So that explosion of channels, that explosion of availability of data that you can access, that's something we have to think about. And I would say we're slow as an industry to react to that. Yeah? We need to get better to be on the front foot of that rather than always chasing that behind and thinking that face-to-face is the mainstay of our interaction. And don't get me wrong, I think we know that 60% of doctors want face-to-face. They like face-to-face. But it's not the only thing they want. They want face-to-face and that orchestration is what we have to get a lot better at. Yeah? So I think that's from a doctor's perspective, where I think this channel orchestration and this understanding what kind of content per channel is the right way to serve the HCP's interest. That's, I think, where at least I would put most focus on. Yeah? From a patient perspective, I think we have a few opportunities. One is patient education. Right? When I was a rep, we dropped leaflets in the doctor's office, and you had these nice leaflets sitting in the waiting room, and patients could read up on a disease state. Yeah? Now, when I look at how my son in university consumes learning, he does YouTube videos, right? He Googles, tell me about. He's studying engineering, so tell me about satellite orbits, and he gets a 50-minute video or a 20-minute video on some expert explaining to him how to calculate satellite orbits, right? Well, the same should be true for patients, right? If patients go online to read up on their disease, why are we not serving that more? Why are we not providing better content? Or why are we not collaborating in the sense of partnership with medical societies to provide that? Yeah? So there are things on the patient education side we can do. But I think there are also things, if you think of telemedicine, if you think of the access of the patient to the doctor, also not having to be face-to-face. Yeah? There are things that provide better speed and, in essence, also lower costs, less travel time, things like that that will make the whole system more agile in the future. So I think from a patient side, there's an industry part that we play on the education, but there are many other parts of the of the patient experience where digital comes in, where we may not necessarily be the main actor in, like telemedicine.
Right. So I know there's a number of technologies we could probably pull out that we say would make a real difference to various stakeholders in the care. But I think what I might do is flip this and say, where do you see the opportunity to leverage technology where should it be prioritized to actually drive some kind of meaningful difference to patients? I know we could embed technology anywhere across the chain, and that would improve things. But where do you think we should be prioritizing?
From an industry point of view, I would prioritize getting better at, or getting faster, using technology to be faster in getting innovation to patients, which essentially means shortening the time of clinical trials. We already have examples. I think last year, the first AI-designed molecule entered phase 1. Yeah? So there was an AI effort to create a new molecule. And the time between creation and entering clinical phase 1 was half the normal time, right? So you can imagine, if you play that through, it's not only the clinical trials where we can shorten effort, shorten time, accelerate things, but it's also in the creation. It's also in the material creation, right? I think we've all heard of examples where a Gen AI engine has created material in 20 minutes where a team takes 2 weeks. Yeah? I mean, we did it in our company. Yeah? A team did patient material for a clinical trial, and we tested we explored with a Gen AI how to do that. And it literally took 20 minutes for a very similar material. Yeah? So why should we not access those accelerations? Yeah? Because yes, we complain about delays in regulatory processes and in reimbursement processes, but we also need to do our homework in terms of shortening development times and getting the innovation to patients faster and getting the data to the regulators in a faster way. Yeah.
All right, well, I'm very disappointed to say we've run out of time here, Claus. But perhaps I'll just end with one question, which I know might be difficult to comprehend at nearly 10 in the morning, but who would be a dream dinner guest for you?
A dream dinner guest? Well, I would invite the head of the European Medicines Agency. And I would like to tell her that it takes almost twice as long in Europe to approve a medicine than in the US, and Europe is not competitive. So that would be my dream dinner guest. That would be an interesting conversation to have.
Claus, thank you so much for joining us.
Views expressed in this podcast are those of individuals being interviewed and do not reflect any company, parent company, or affiliates they represent.